The arrival of Princess Xyra. The meeting room on Earth's orbital station was buzzing with anticipation. This was humanity's first official encounter with an advanced alien species, the Xyra. Every government representative, military officer, and scientist was on edge. When the Xyra delegation arrived, their sleek silver spacecraft docked silently, exuding elegance and power. The Xyra stepped out, tall and ethereal, their shimmering robes reflecting the light like liquid metal. Their leader, a stern-faced male named Admiral Xyra, stood in front of Earth's delegation. His voice was calm but commanding as he said, "We come with a special request. It is a matter of great importance to our empire." Everyone leaned forward, eager to hear what the advanced aliens might need from humanity. Admiral Xyra gestured behind him, and a smaller figure stepped out. She was stunning with delicate features and vibrant skin that glowed faintly. Her robes were intricately designed, sparkling like starlight. But there was something unusual about her movements. She seemed hesitant, almost clumsy, as if unsure of where to step. "This," Xyra announced, "is Princess Xyra, heir to the Xyra throne. We require your assistance in caring for her during her visit to Earth." The room fell silent. The humans exchanged confused glances. A princess. What kind of help did she need? Xyra tilted her head, looking at the humans as if she were examining strange creatures. She didn't speak, only stared. Finally, Claire Reed, a young engineer with a sharp wit, whispered to her colleague, "She's gorgeous, but what does she need us for?" "Babysitting." Admiral Xyra continued, his tone serious. "Princess Xyra is not accustomed to manual labor. She has never dressed herself, prepared her own meals, or engaged in any physical activity. Our customs forbid her from doing so. It would be a grave insult to her status." The humans were stunned. Claire couldn't help but laugh under her breath. "You're telling me she can't even put on her own shoes?" A sharp glare from her superior silenced her, but the thought lingered. How could someone be so helpless? Admiral Xyra added, "It is vital that she remains safe and comfortable. The princess's presence here is part of an important cultural exchange. We trust you will treat her with the respect she deserves." As the humans tried to process this, Xyra stepped forward, her movements deliberate and regal. "I do not speak your language," she said in a melodic but heavily accented voice, "but I trust my people's judgment. I hope this arrangement will be acceptable." Her words were translated by a small floating device by her side. But the tone was unmistakable. She wasn't asking for help. She was commanding it. After the meeting, Claire and a small team were assigned to oversee Xyra's stay on Earth. The task seemed simple enough. Provide her with the best accommodations, ensure her needs were met, and avoid offending her royal ego. But within hours they realized just how challenging this would be. Xyra's quarters were a luxurious suite with every modern convenience, but she barely acknowledged it. Instead, she called for an assistant to help her change into more comfortable robes. The team looked at each other, unsure what to do. "Does she really need help with that?" Claire muttered. "Yes," came the blunt reply from one of the Xyra aides. "She has never done it herself." Claire sighed, stepping into the room. "All right, princess, let's get you sorted." Xyra stared at Claire as if she were speaking gibberish. "I do not take instructions from commoners," she said through her translator. Claire crossed her arms, her patience wearing thin. "And I don't usually dress aliens, but here we are." Xyra blinked, clearly unused to being spoken to in such a casual manner. For the first time, she looked unsure. Claire took a deep breath, reminding herself that this was a diplomatic mission. "Let's try this again," she said in a calmer tone. "You're here on Earth. Things work differently here. We're all trying to help you, but you've got to meet us halfway." The princess hesitated, then gave a small nod. It wasn't much, but it was a start. As the hours turned into days, the human team began to realize just how unprepared they were for Xyra's level of dependence. She didn't know how to operate a simple touchscreen, let alone prepare a meal. When a tray of Earth delicacies was brought to her, she looked at it in confusion. "What is this?" she asked. "It's food," Claire replied, suppressing a laugh. "You pick it up, put it in your mouth and chew. Pretty universal, don't you think?" Xyra frowned. "On my world, servants feed me." Claire couldn't hold back this time. "Well, welcome to Earth. We do things a bit differently here." Despite the frustrations, Claire couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity for Xyra. The princess wasn't just pampered, she was trapped in a gilded cage. Everything about her life had been controlled, leaving her utterly unprepared for the real world. But as the team worked to adapt to her needs, something strange began to happen. Xyra started observing the humans closely, her curiosity growing. She watched as they worked together, argued, and laughed. For the first time, she seemed to realize that there was more to life than being served. The peaceful routine didn't last long. One night, as the station lights dimmed, a strange signal was detected. It was a message in the Xylathian language, but the tone was ominous. "Protect the princess at all costs," it read. Claire frowned as she read the translation. Protect her? From what? No one had an answer, but unease settled over the station. Something was coming, and the princess's presence on Earth might not be as simple as it seemed. Humanity meets royal chaos. The clatter of a broken plate echoed through the facility's dining hall. Claire Reed groaned, pinching the bridge of her nose. Across the room, Princess Xyra sat at a table, staring at the spilled contents of her plate like they had personally offended her. "I asked for assistance," Xyra said, her tone sharp and regal. "How am I supposed to eat this without someone serving me?" Claire crossed her arms, resisting the urge to snap back. "Your Highness," she began, her voice laced with strained patience. "This is Earth. We don't have a royal kitchen staff at your beck and call. You're going to have to, pick up the fork and eat." Xyra tilted her head, as though Claire had just suggested she perform an impossible physics experiment. "I am royalty. I do not perform menial tasks." "Yeah, well, we're all peasants here," Claire shot back under her breath, earning a snort from one of her colleagues. The day had started normally enough, or as normal as it could get with an alien princess in the building. Xyra's schedule included a tour of Earth's scientific advancements, a meeting with cultural representatives, and a dinner prepared by some of the finest chefs in the region. But from the moment she woke up, chaos followed her like a shadow. First, Xyra had refused to get out of bed without someone physically helping her. When Claire arrived to check on her, she found two members of the human staff awkwardly attempting to fold Xyra's intricate Xylathian robes while the princess lay on the bed, scrolling through an Earth tablet with obvious confusion. "This device," Xyra had said, holding up the tablet. "It does not respond to me." "That's because you have to touch the screen," Claire had replied, stifling a laugh. Xyra had frowned deeply. "Technology on my planet is voice-activated. This, touching, is primitive." By lunchtime, Xyra's struggles had become a running joke among the staff. She had knocked over a glass of water while trying to understand Earth's dining etiquette, nearly burned herself on a cup of hot tea, and demanded that someone escort her from one room to another, even though the distance was barely 10 steps. "I can't believe this is my life right now," Claire muttered as she helped clean up the mess from the dining hall incident. "Look on the bright side," joked another team member. "At least she's keeping things interesting." Claire didn't laugh. Something about Xyra's helplessness was bothering her, not just because it was frustrating, but because it felt unnatural. How could someone so intelligent, so poised, be completely incapable of handling even the simplest tasks? That question lingered in her mind as the day progressed. Xyra wasn't stupid. She asked thoughtful questions during the cultural briefing, showing genuine curiosity about human history and values. But every time she was asked to do something herself, she froze, as if the concept was alien to her. Later that evening, While Claire was reviewing security protocols in the control room, an alert popped up on her screen. It was a notification from the station's surveillance system. Unusual activity detected near Princess Villara's quarters. The message read. Claire's heart skipped a beat. She immediately tapped her communicator. Security, report to the princess's quarters. I'm on my way. When Claire arrived, she found Villara standing in the center of her room, staring at the wall. Her usually composed demeanor was replaced by a look of unease. Princess, what's going on? Claire asked, stepping inside. Villara hesitated before speaking. There was a noise, a strange noise outside my room. Claire frowned. What kind of noise? A faint hum, Villara said, her voice quieter now, like the sound of a Celathian cloaking device. Claire's stomach dropped. A cloaking device? Are you saying someone might be here? I cannot say for sure, Villara replied, her confidence wavering for the first time. But if they are, they mean harm. Before Claire could respond, the lights in the room flickered. A chill ran down her spine. She tapped her communicator again. This is Claire Reed. I need a lockdown on all external access points. Now. The lights stabilized, and the hum Villara had described seemed to fade. But the tension in the air remained thick. Princess, Claire said, her voice firm, if there's any chance someone is targeting you, we need to know why. You're not just here for a cultural exchange, are you? Villara looked away, her expression unreadable. For a moment, Claire thought she wouldn't answer. But then, in a rare moment of vulnerability, the princess spoke. My presence here, Villara said slowly, is not entirely diplomatic. There are those within my empire who believe I am unfit to lead. Claire stared at her, stunned. Unfit? Why? Villara's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Claire saw the cracks in her regal facade. Because I am not what they want me to be. I am not strong. I am not capable. I am a symbol, nothing more. The words hung in the air like a heavy weight. Claire didn't know what to say. Before she could respond, an alarm blared through the station. A voice came over the intercom. Unauthorized access detected in Sector 5. All personnel remain on high alert. Claire's heart pounded as she turned back to Villara. Looks like we're about to find out how true that is. Villara's eyes widened, and for the first time, Claire saw something new in the princess's expression. Fear. The hidden threat. The quiet hum of Earth's orbital station was broken by the sharp crackle of static over the intercom. Claire Reed jolted awake in her quarters, her heart racing. She sat up, staring at the blinking light on her communicator. A voice came through, strained and urgent. Security breach detected. All personnel to high alert. Repeat, security breach detected. Claire grabbed her jacket and bolted down the hallway, the cold metal floors amplifying her hurried steps. She reached the command center, where chaos was unfolding. Officers barked orders, screens flashed red with warnings, and the station's AI was struggling to pinpoint the source of the disturbance. What's going on? Claire demanded, pushing her way to the central console. Lieutenant Hayes, the station's head of security, barely looked up. We picked up an unauthorized signal near the princess's quarters. It's Celathian tech, but heavily modified. Definitely not from her official entourage. Claire's stomach sank. You think it's the rebels? Hayes nodded grimly. If I had to guess, they've been watching us since she arrived. And now they're making their move. Before Claire could respond, the main display lit up with footage from the station's surveillance cameras. The feed showed a shadowy figure moving through the maintenance tunnels, cloaked in what looked like an energy shield. It was almost impossible to track. The figure blurred in and out of view, the shield scrambling the sensors. Do we have eyes on the princess? Claire asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She's in her quarters, Hayes replied. But if that thing gets any closer, she won't be safe for long. Claire didn't waste another second. She grabbed a sidearm from the security locker and sprinted toward Vilara's quarters. When she arrived, she found Vilara sitting in the middle of her room, her posture unnervingly calm. The princess's glowing skin reflected the dim light, and her expression was unreadable. "You're surprisingly composed for someone in danger," Claire said, closing the door behind her. Vilara looked up, her voice steady. "Panic accomplishes nothing. If my time has come, so be it." Claire stared at her, dumbfounded. "Seriously, that's your plan? Sit here and hope for the best." Vilara tilted her head, as if studying Claire like a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "I was raised to trust in the strength of my people. They have always protected me." "Well, your people aren't here," Claire shot back. "And I'm not about to let some invisible assassin waltz in and turn you into a political martyr. So get up." Vilara hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to being spoken to so bluntly. "Where are we going?" "To the safe room," Claire replied. "And while we're at it, maybe you can explain why these rebels hate you so much." Vilara stood, her movements as graceful as ever, but there was a flicker of unease in her glowing eyes. "They believe I am unworthy of the throne," she admitted. "They see me as a symbol of everything that is wrong with our empire. To them, I am a relic of an outdated system." Claire glanced at her as they moved through the corridors. "And are they wrong?" Vilara didn't answer immediately. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. "Perhaps not. But the rebellion will only bring chaos. My people need stability, even if it comes in the form of a flawed leader." Before Claire could respond, the station's lights flickered, plunging the hallway into darkness for a brief moment. A faint hum filled the air, a sound Claire recognized from the surveillance footage. "They're here," she whispered, her grip tightening on her sidearm. Vilara's calm facade cracked. "What do we do?" "Stay behind me," Claire ordered, scanning the hallway for any sign of movement. The hum grew louder, and a shimmering distortion appeared at the far end of the corridor. It was the assassin, cloaked in advanced Xyra tech. Claire fired a warning shot, but the energy shield absorbed it effortlessly. "Figures," Claire muttered. "Nothing's ever easy." The assassin moved closer, their forms still obscured by the shield. Claire's mind raced. Conventional weapons wouldn't work, but maybe. "Princess," she said, her voice urgent, "can your people's technology disrupt cloaking fields?" Vilara blinked, then nodded slowly. "Yes, but I would need access to your station's systems." "Then we're going to the control room," Claire said, backing toward the nearest junction. "And you better hope your tech is as good as they say it is." The control room was in chaos when they arrived. Officers were scrambling to contain the breach, but the assassin was moving too quickly for the automated defenses to track. "We need to disable their cloaking shield," Claire said, pushing Vilara toward the main console. "Can you do it?" Vilara hesitated, her hands hovering over the interface. "I have never operated such machinery before." Claire groaned. "Great. Learn fast." With Claire's guidance, Vilara began inputting commands, her glowing fingers flying over the console. The station's systems hummed to life, integrating Xyra algorithms with human technology. Outside the control room, the assassins' hum grew louder, their presence an oppressive weight, pressing down on everyone in the room. "Hurry," Claire urged, glancing at the doorway. "I am trying," Vilara snapped, for once sounding like someone under pressure. Finally, the station's sensors locked onto the assassin's cloaking field. Vilara pressed a final command, and a pulse of energy rippled through the air. The hum stopped. The assassin's shield flickered and failed, revealing a figure clad in dark Xyra armor. "Target acquired," Hayes said, raising his weapon. The assassin didn't stand a chance. Within seconds, they were surrounded by armed guards. Their mission thwarted. As the room settled into tense silence, Vilara sank into a chair, her composed facade shattered. "You did good, Princess," Claire said, her tone softer now. Vilara looked up at her, a hint of gratitude in her eyes. "Perhaps Perhaps I am capable of more than I thought. Claire smiled faintly. Stick with me, and we'll find out. But even as the immediate danger passed, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Humanity steps in. The air was thick with tension in the station's briefing room. Claire Reed leaned against the wall, arms crossed, as a holographic map of the station flickered in the air. Lieutenant Hayes pointed to several highlighted areas. These are the breaches the assassin exploited, Hayes explained. Whoever sent them knew this station's weak points. If we don't reinforce security immediately, we won't survive the next attack. Next attack? Claire echoed, her voice sharp. You're saying there's more coming? Hayes nodded grimly. The assassin was just the first wave. We intercepted a transmission. There's a Salathian rebel fleet heading our way. ETA is less than 48 hours. The room fell silent. Even Xyra, seated at the far end of the table, seemed shaken. So, what's the plan? Claire asked, breaking the silence. We can't exactly call Earth for backup. We're on our own out here. Hayes sighed. We fortify, we prepare, and we fight. That's the only option. Claire's eyes flicked to Xyra. The princess had been silent since the assassination attempt, her usual regal demeanor replaced by an unsettling stillness. It wasn't fear, exactly. It was more like she was unraveling, piece by piece. Princess, Claire said, drawing Xyra's attention. If these rebels are coming for you, we need to know why. The full story. No more half-truths. Xyra hesitated, her glowing skin dimming slightly, a physical sign of her unease. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than usual. My people have always viewed royalty as sacred, she began. Untouchable. Divine. But that divinity comes with a price. We are not taught to fight, to think, or to act for ourselves. We are raised to be symbols, nothing more. Claire frowned. So, what? They think you're useless. Xyra's gaze dropped. To the rebels, I represent everything wrong with our empire. The oppression, the inequality, all of it. They believe that by removing me, they can dismantle the system. Claire straightened. And what do you believe? Xyra looked up, her glowing eyes meeting Claire's. For a moment, there was no arrogance, no distance, just raw vulnerability. I don't know, she admitted. Before Claire could respond, an alert blared through the station. Hayes tapped his communicator. Report. Unidentified ships approaching the perimeter, came the reply. It's the rebels. The command center was a hive of activity. Claire stood next to Xyra, who had reluctantly agreed to stay out of the line of fire. The station's defense systems were online, but against a fleet, they wouldn't hold for long. Status. Hayes barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. 5 ships, small but heavily armed, an officer replied. They're demanding we hand over the princess, or they'll destroy the station. Xyra flinched at the words. Claire stepped closer to her, her voice low. You okay? Xyra nodded, but her hands were clenched tightly at her sides. We're not handing her over, Claire said firmly, addressing the room. Hayes glanced at her. You got a better idea. Yeah, Claire said. We fight back. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, no one moved. Then Hayes nodded. All right, let's show them what humanity can do. The first shots fired from the rebel ships hit the station's outer shields, sending a tremor through the facility. Claire gripped the edge of a console as alarms blared around her. Shields at 85%. An officer called out. Return fire, Hayes ordered. The station's cannons roared to life, sending beams of energy toward the attacking ships. One rebel vessel took a direct hit, spinning out of formation. Claire watched the battle unfold, her mind racing. The station wasn't built for prolonged combat. They needed an edge, something to turn the tide. Her eyes darted to Xyra. Princess, your people's tech is more advanced than ours. Is there anything you can use to help? Xyra hesitated. I am not trained in. Figure it out, Claire interrupted. Because if you don't, we're all dead. Xyra took a deep breath and stepped forward. I will need access to your systems. Hayes raised an eyebrow. You sure about this? Claire nodded. She's our best shot. Xyra's hands moved over the console with increasing confidence, her glowing fingers dancing across the interface. She accessed the station's systems, integrating Xyrathian algorithms with human tech. What are you doing? Claire asked, standing by her side. Overloading their targeting systems, Xyra replied. If I succeed, their weapons will become useless. If, Claire repeated. Xyra shot her a look. This is not as simple as you make it sound. The room shook as another blast hit the station. Shields at 60%. Hurry up, Claire urged. Xyra's glowing eyes narrowed as she focused. Finally, she pressed a final command. Done. Outside, the rebel ships began to falter. Their weapons fired sporadically, and one ship's engine sputtered out completely. They're retreating, an officer shouted. Cheers erupted in the command center, but Claire's relief was short-lived. She turned to Xyra, who was slumped against the console, visibly drained. You okay? Claire asked. Xyra nodded weakly. I did not think it would be this difficult. Claire smiled faintly. Welcome to the real world. But even as the station settled back into an uneasy calm, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. The rebels had retreated, but they hadn't given up, and Xyra's journey was far from finished. The turning point, the silence in the aftermath of the battle, was deafening. The rebel ships had retreated, but the station was left battered, its shields barely holding and its crew shaken. Claire Reed stood in the observation deck, staring out at the void of space. Her reflection in the glass was tired, her uniform smudged with soot from the chaos of the last few hours. Behind her, the soft shuffle of footsteps broke the quiet. She turned to see Princess Xyra entering the room, her glowing presence dimmer than usual, her regal posture slightly slouched. For once, she didn't look like a figurehead of an empire. She just looked lost. You shouldn't be here, Claire said, turning back to the window. I could say the same to you. Xyra replied softly, her voice lacking its usual haughty tone. But here you are. Claire smirked faintly, but didn't respond. The two stood in silence for a moment, the stars beyond the glass their only company. Finally, Xyra spoke. Do you think they will come back? Claire sighed. Yeah, they will. They always do. Xyra moved closer, her glowing eyes fixed on Claire. How do you do it? Face danger, knowing it could mean your end. Claire turned to her, raising an eyebrow. You're asking me that? You're the one they're after. Xyra hesitated. That is different. I was raised to be protected, to rely on others for my survival. You are different. You fight. You act. You live. Claire crossed her arms. Yeah, well, I wasn't exactly born into a throne room, was I? We don't have the luxury of sitting around waiting for someone to save us. Xyra's expression shifted, her glowing skin brightening slightly. Could I learn? Claire blinked, caught off guard. Learn what? To fight, to live as you do. The request hung in the air like a challenge. Claire studied Xyra for a long moment, trying to gauge if she was serious. The princess's gaze didn't waver. You're not exactly soldier material, Claire said, her tone skeptical. Perhaps not, Xyra admitted, but I can no longer afford to be what I was. The next morning, Claire led Xyra to the station's gym. The space was sparse but functional, with exercise equipment, training dummies, and a small weapons locker. Xyra looked around, her expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. What is this place? Xyra asked. A start, Claire replied. If you want to learn, we're starting with the basics. Xyra's glowing eyes narrowed. I am prepared. Claire snorted. We'll see about that. The first lesson was simple. Self-defense. Claire demonstrated a few basic moves, showing Xyra how to block an attack and escape a hold. The princess watched intently, but when it was her turn to try, she stumbled awkwardly, her movements stiff and uncertain. "This is harder than it looks," Xyra admitted, wiping a faint sheen of sweat from her brow. "Welcome to the real world, princess," Claire said with a grin. "It's messy and hard, but you'll figure it out." Hours turned into days, and Xyra's training became a regular routine. Claire pushed her hard, sometimes to the brink of frustration, but the princess never gave up. Slowly, she began to improve. Her movements became sharper, her confidence grew, and for the first time, she seemed to be stepping out of the shadow of her royal upbringing. Meanwhile, the station was preparing for the inevitable return of the rebels. Hayes and the security team were reinforcing defenses, while Claire worked with the engineering crew to upgrade the station's systems. But it wasn't just the humans who were changing. Xyra was no longer the helpless figure they had met weeks ago. She spent time with the crew, asking questions about their lives, their struggles, and their dreams. She began to understand what it meant to be part of a team, to contribute rather than command. One night, as Claire and Xyra worked on a damaged console in the engineering bay, Xyra spoke up. "Your people," she began, her voice thoughtful. "They are so resilient. Even in the face of danger, they find ways to laugh, to hope. I have never seen anything like it." Claire looked up from her work, her expression softening. "It's not just humans. You've got that in you too, you know." Xyra shook her head. "I am not like you." "Not yet," Claire said, "but you're getting there." The turning point came during a routine systems check. An encrypted message was intercepted. Another warning from the rebels. "Hand over Xyra, or we will destroy everything," the message read. The threat was clear, and the crew knew the station couldn't withstand another attack. In the command center, tension was high as the officers debated their options. "We can't fight them off again," Hayes said. "Not without reinforcements." "We don't have reinforcements," Claire countered. "We either hold the line or we're done." Xyra stepped forward, her glowing presence commanding attention. "Perhaps I could speak to them," she said. Claire frowned. "That's a terrible idea." "They hate me because they see me as weak," Xyra replied. "But if I show them that I am not the symbol they despise, perhaps they will listen." Claire hesitated, the weight of Xyra's words sinking in. The princess had changed. There was no denying it. But was it enough? "All right," Claire said finally. "But if we do this, we do it together." Xyra nodded, determination shining in her eyes. Together. For the first time, Claire saw not a pampered princess, but a leader in the making. The real fight was just beginning. The princess fights back. The faint hiss of recycled air filled the command center as the crew waited in tense silence. The rebel fleet had returned, their ships hovering menacingly on the edge of the station's sensors. Every officer and engineer on board stood at their stations, their faces grim with anticipation. Claire Reed paced back and forth, her hand gripping the sidearm holstered at her hip. "Any word from the rebels?" she asked, her voice cutting through the stillness. Lieutenant Hayes glanced up from his console. "Same as before. They want the princess, or they'll turn us into scrap." Claire stopped pacing and turned to Xyra, who stood in the corner of the room, her posture as regal as ever. But there was something different about her now. Her glowing eyes were no longer filled with fear or hesitation. They were sharp, focused, and brimming with resolve. "This is your last chance to back out," Claire said, her tone softer than usual. Xyra straightened her shoulders. "No, I will not hide while others risk their lives for me. It is time I take responsibility for the role I was born into." Claire studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, princess. Let's give them a fight they won't forget." The station's holographic projector flickered to life, broadcasting a signal to the rebel fleet. Xyra stepped into the center of the projection field, her shimmering presence magnified and transmitted to the enemy ships. "I am Princess Xyra of the Xylathian Empire," she began, her voice steady and commanding. "I know you see me as a symbol of everything you despise: oppression, corruption, weakness. But you are wrong. I am not the helpless figure you believe me to be." On board the rebel flagship, the rebel leader, Commander Kale, leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable as he watched Xyra's transmission. "You have spent your lives fighting against a system that failed you," Xyra continued, "and I will not deny the truth of your struggle. Our empire has wronged you, but killing me will not bring the change you seek. It will only deepen the divide between us." Kale's eyes narrowed. "And what would you know of struggle, princess?" he muttered under his breath. Back on the station, Xyra's speech was interrupted by a sudden alarm. "Energy signature detected," Hayes shouted. "They're charging weapons." Xyra's composure didn't falter. She turned to Claire, who was already barking orders to the crew. "Let me finish," Xyra said. Claire hesitated but nodded. "Make it quick." Xyra stepped closer to the projector, her voice rising with intensity. "If you truly wish to see change, then face me here and now. Not as a symbol of royalty, but as a leader willing to fight for her people. If you believe I am weak, prove it. Step onto this station and face me in person." The room fell silent. Even the crew stared at Xyra in stunned disbelief. "Did she just challenge them to a duel?" Hayes muttered. Claire smirked. "I think she did." On the rebel flagship, Kale slammed his fist on the armrest of his chair. "Prepare my shuttle," he ordered. "Sir?" one of his officers asked hesitantly. Kale's eyes burned with determination. "If the princess wants to prove her strength, let's see what she's made of." Minutes later, a lone rebel shuttle docked with the station. The airlock hissed open, and Commander Kale stepped out, his imposing figure clad in battle-worn armor. He was flanked by 2 guards, but his gaze was locked on Xyra, who stood waiting in the docking bay, flanked by Claire and Hayes. "You've got guts, princess," Kale said, his voice rough but begrudgingly respectful. "I'll give you that." Xyra held her ground, her glowing skin brighter than ever. "If you want to fight me, then let us settle this here and now. But I warn you, I am not the woman I once was." Kale chuckled darkly. "We'll see about that." The duel took place in the station's gym, cleared out and transformed into an impromptu arena. The crew gathered around the edges, watching in tense silence as Xyra and Kale faced off. Claire stood nearby, her hand hovering near her weapon. "You sure about this?" she whispered to Xyra. Xyra nodded. "If I cannot prove my strength now, I never will." Kale raised his weapon, a sleek, curved blade that crackled with energy. Xyra held a smaller, human-made stun baton, the only weapon she'd been trained to use during her time on the station. The fight began, and Kale lunged forward, his movements swift and brutal. Xyra dodged clumsily, her inexperience showing, but she quickly regained her footing. She remembered Claire's training. Stay light, stay focused, use your opponent's strength against them. As the fight wore on, something incredible happened. Xyra began to hold her own, blocking Kale's strikes and landing a few blows of her own. The crew watched in awe as the once pampered princess fought with determination and grit. Finally, with a well-timed move, Xyra disarmed Kale, sending his blade skittering across the floor. She held the stun baton to his chest, her breathing heavy but her gaze unwavering. "Yield," she commanded. Kale stared at her for a long moment before letting out a low laugh. "You've got fire in you, princess," he said, raising his hands in surrender. "Maybe I was wrong about you." Xyra lowered her weapon, her glowing skin dimming as the adrenaline faded. "If you truly want change, Commander," she said, "then help me build it. Together." Kale studied her, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps it's time for a new way." As the rebels stood down and the fleet withdrew, the station erupted into cheers. Xyra had done what no one thought possible. She had faced her enemies and earned their respect. Claire approached her, a proud smile on her face. "Not bad, Princess. Not bad at all." Xyra managed a faint smile in return. "Thank you, Claire, for everything." But even as the crew celebrated, Xyra knew this was just the beginning. The fight for true peace had only begun, and she was ready to lead it. A new alliance. The rebel fleet hung in orbit like silent predators, their weapons deactivated but their presence still heavy with tension. The station's comms buzzed with activity as humanity's leaders scrambled to understand the sudden ceasefire. Inside the command center, the mood was no less chaotic, but Claire Reeves stood off to the side, watching Princess Xyra with a mix of admiration and concern. Xyra was seated at the center of the room, flanked by Commander Kale and Lieutenant Hayes. The princess's usual glow was subdued, her exhaustion evident, but her eyes remained sharp, fixed on the holographic display of the Xylathian Empire's royal fleet, now approaching Earth's sector. "How long until they arrive?" Xyra asked, her voice calm but firm. 4 hours, maybe less," Hayes replied, his tone grim. "And they're not coming for peace. They think the rebels are here to overthrow you, and they'll wipe out anyone standing in their way." Claire leaned against the console. "So, your empire thinks they're saving you, while the rebels think they're liberating the galaxy. Meanwhile, Earth's stuck in the middle." She sighed. "Great." Kale crossed his arms, his expression hard. "The royal fleet won't stop until they destroy us. And if they think humanity is harboring me and my people, they'll destroy this station too." Xyra stood, her posture straight despite the weight of the situation. "Then we must make them see the truth." Kale frowned. "And how do you plan to do that? Your father isn't exactly known for listening to reason." "My father will not listen to reason," Xyra admitted, "but the Xylathian people might." As the royal fleet closed in, Xyra and Claire worked together to draft a transmission that would be broadcast not just to the approaching ships, but to the entire Xylathian Empire. It was a bold move, one that could either unite their people or seal their fates. In the station's broadcast chamber, Xyra stood in front of the projector, her figure framed by the faint glow of Earth in the background. Claire adjusted the controls, ensuring the signal was strong enough to reach its destination. "Are you ready for this?" Claire asked quietly. Xyra took a deep breath. "No, but I must do it anyway." Claire smiled faintly. "That's the spirit." The transmission began, and Xyra's image was projected across the galaxy. She stood tall, her voice steady as she addressed her people. "My name is Princess Xyra of the Xylathian Empire," she began, "and I come to you not as a ruler, but as a daughter of this galaxy, a galaxy that is on the brink of destruction." She paused, letting her words sink in. "For too long, we have allowed ourselves to be divided. By fear, by anger, by greed. We have fought one another when we should have been building together. And now, that division threatens to destroy us all." Xyra's voice grew stronger as she continued. "I was raised to be a symbol of power, but I was never taught the true meaning of leadership. It was here, on this human station, that I learned what it means to fight, not for myself, but for something greater, for unity, for hope, for peace." The image shifted to show the rebels, standing alongside the human crew. Commander Kale stepped forward, his expression solemn. "We were enemies once," Kale said, "but we have come to understand that our fight was never truly with each other. It was with the system that kept us apart. And now we stand together, Xylathians and humans, royals and rebels, not as adversaries, but as allies." Xyra's image returned, her glowing eyes filled with determination. "To my father, to the royal fleet, I say this: end this war before it begins. Lay down your weapons and join us in building a better future, not just for Xylathians, but for all who call this galaxy home." The transmission ended, and the room fell silent. All eyes were on Xyra, waiting to see if her gamble would pay off. Minutes passed like hours until a communication signal lit up on the console. Hayes tapped the screen, his expression guarded. "It's the flagship," he said. "They're responding." The holographic display flickered to life, revealing the stern face of Emperor Xyra, Velara's father. His piercing gaze swept across the room, lingering on Velara. "Daughter," he said, his voice heavy with both authority and something that might have been regret. "You have defied me." "I have led," Velara replied, her tone unwavering. "Something you taught me to do, even if you did not realize it." The Emperor's expression softened, just slightly. "You speak of unity, but words are not enough. The rebels are criminals. They cannot be trusted." Kale stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We were criminals because we had no voice, no hope. The princess has given us both. We are ready to build, not destroy." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting between Velara and Kale. Finally, he sighed. "Very well. I will call off the fleet. But know this, Velara. The path you have chosen will not be easy. You will face resistance, from within and without." Velara straightened her shoulders. "I would expect nothing less." As the royal fleet retreated, the station erupted into cheers. Claire leaned against a console, watching Velara with a small, proud smile. "You did it," Claire said. "We did it," Velara corrected, her voice warm. Claire chuckled. "All right, princess. What now?" Velara looked out at the stars, her expression thoughtful. "Now we build that better future, together." For the first time in her life, Velara felt like more than a symbol. She was a leader, and she was ready to lead.